So I'm going to talk about artificial assistants, and in true NLP fashion, let's unpack this a little bit. So who am I? I'm Chris. Who are you? You're the audience at the amazing Indaba X. And then how am I going to be helping you? Well, I'm going to be helping you because I have a weird background in AI, neuroscience, and psychology. And so I do a PhD in neuroscience, and I apply AI for a number of companies on the side here. Also affiliated with the Neuroscience Institute as well. Okay. Ignore that one and go to the shaking but less intense one. Okay, conversation topics. We're going to be asking, why is reasonable intelligence so elusive? No one has amazing experiences with chatbots that say that's definitely better than human conversation, right? So why is it elusive? What are current chatbots or artificial assistants? I'm going to be using those interchangeably, and we're going to be modifying some things. What are the current states, both in positive abilities and in the weaknesses, and then where are they going to be going? And then we're going to talk about some design principles, both from a technology and psychology side, because they're going to be working together. And then finally, I'm going to be sharing some resources. I'm going to cheat there a little bit. I'm going to put up a whole bunch of links that you're not going to be able to read, but you can see the video afterwards, and I'll give you this presentation. Cool. So, why does reasonable intelligence remain elusive? Okay. So here's a great conversation. What you want, chatbots, when you want it. Sorry, I don't understand your question. Okay. It's not my credit. It was at a chatbot conference 2016. And I've identified some problems as to why this is the case, right? And the first problem is the definition of a chatbot sucks, okay? There's no intelligence included in this human-computer dialogue system with natural language. It doesn't say it has to be clever, it just has to say it has to be some form of language, right? And you can just hard code that. Second thing is we expect everything to pass the Turing test, regardless of how you feel about the Turing test. The concept of it being intelligent enough for people is the point. And that we expect from almost everything we engage with, because we engage with humans, and now we're doing it in the same system of chatting, and now we expect the same thing from those systems, right? Third, we don't actually understand intelligence. We don't really know what underlies a whole bunch of functions that we do so easily. And relatedly, fourth one, is language is hard. I'm going to change that to actually, so much more complicated than that. It's more than just language, it's conversation. And there's a lot more to conversation than just what people say. Okay? And I'll touch more on that as well when I get there, to the solutions. So one possible way is just change the definition of chatbots. I'm not actually going to use quotes, but I'll do a framework. Then we need to set expectations in order to make sure that we know what the chatbot is and isn't capable of. Then we need to analyze people's behavior to try analyze functional intelligence, basically. So we don't need to understand intelligence to the neuron, per se. But we should understand its functional implications, and we often infer that from people's behaviors. And then finally, how are we going to solve that conversation is hard? Well, this talk is going to solve that. Maybe not quite. Okay. So the first one, to try redefine this chatbot or artificial assistant a little bit more, I'm going to use a framework, right? So it's not a one-sentence definition. But maybe a modern chatbot should have these properties. And that is, it needs to be dialogic, rational, and embodied, okay? So it needs to be able to converse with someone, but it can't just say the same thing over and over again, even if it's a proper sentence, because then it's a dialogue, but it doesn't make sense. So then there's rational dialogue in there as well. And finally, and this is often left out, is you need to have a personality with your assistant, with your chatbot. And this is important because if you don't give it one, your user will. Okay. And what's also important, I think, in when you're defining what something should be, you need to evaluate how well it's performing. And a lot of the time, we evaluate it quite arbitrarily. Okay. There are some very, very good metrics of how close is it to the ground truth, for example. But when you're dealing with people and they don't actually know what they want, then sometimes it's a little bit difficult to evaluate things. But here are some guidelines to do such things. Okay, so it's called the Paradigm for Dialogue System Evaluation, Paradise. I did not come up with that. Way too punny. Okay, so some requirements or some metrics to evaluate this is how easy is it to use, How much clarity, how much natural conversation is there? Is it not just forced, or is it not just the same thing over and over again? How friendly is it? So again, this is personality side. How robust is it to misunderstanding? Because that's where frustrations happen really, really, really quickly. And it leads to people just never using it again if they have one bad experience. Well, there's stats to this, but maybe not never. Okay, and then that's related to willingness to use the system again. So the last two are fairly related. They're quite correlated. Okay. Next one, let's set expectations. You already know, don't go in there. But imagine you couldn't read any of the 4 languages that are there. You wouldn't know what the expectations are. So set them up front, okay, and make sure they make sense in its entirety. So you don't want it to say no entry and then have like exceptions there in a different language, okay? It needs to be clear in its entirety and not in these piecemeal bits. Next one would be, this is the quote, design your bot's personality or your users will do it for you. And this is entirely true. This is from Booking, but there's another example. I can't remember the company's name. There's another example where they had a bot, and then they asked the users afterwards, was it male or was it female, and why? Okay, and a lot of sexism came out. They were like, no, it's male because it was dominant and it was straight to the point. Or they said it was female because it was caring and asked how I felt. And it was actually the same bot, and these people were just projecting something onto it. Okay, so do it yourself, and it will guide things a lot better. Cool. And then finally, this relates as well to conversation is hard. This is a sentence that, I mean, does it really make sense? Would you understand what swaggy means in this context, if that's all you had? Who knows? Then street science and different languages. So there's clearly not a one-to-one mapping between languages, right? And including letters. And the reason we struggle with understanding why conversation and language is so hard is because it's so easy for us to do. And it's easy for us to do, and we forgot how we learned it, because we learned it when we were so young, and we don't remember learning it. Okay? So humans are really good at forgetting how difficult tasks that we are good at it. Actually, like how good we are. Okay? So, but as soon as you go to a different country, you suddenly remember, oh my goodness, this is tough to learn a new language unless I'm forced to do so. So there are good reminders there of like foreign languages. But in general, language is tough, and we often forget the complexities there. So when people are dealing with chatbots, it's like, this is easy. I chat with everyone every day. Why can't this system do it? Okay. So what can chatbots do? What can't they do? And where are they going? Cool. So chatbots have a great potential. And the reason they have great potential is people actually don't like apps. Okay? It's one of the biggest reasons. More people use Messenger, Facebook Messenger, for example, than they use the Facebook social platform. And in general, people use more messaging platforms than social platforms. Okay? People are decreasing the number of apps they use, number of apps they install, and I think they use an average of 4 apps per month, is the average person. Chatbot messaging, you are used to having your friend send you a message, and we want instant gratification, so we open it. You're used to swiping left on notifications, but now you get a notification from a messaging platform, and you associate it with a friend, so now you're more likely to open it. Okay, so there actually are higher open rates. Also, people tend to purchase things for a higher amount. They're more susceptible to being offered something. Again, with the product advice is often taken. They're more susceptible to taking these things through a chatbot interface than an app. This is obviously still a very new scenario, so you're going to see these stats change over time. But still, the potential is really there. A whole bunch of people are doing this and really making a difference. Some don't perform that well, though. Okay, so the frustrations that come with chatbots are also real, not just the potential for good. So we assume anything with a conversation interface will converse with us at near human level, and most do not. Again, it relates to setting expectations and understanding the user and the personality. Cool. So some bots that are currently in existence are amazing. Has anyone heard of Mitsuku before? Mitsuku? So has anyone heard of the Lubner Prize before? Okay, the Lubner Prize is a bot that passes the Turing test. And it's a relatively trivial Turing test, but it's still considered. And it's been around since, I actually don't know, I think 1995. But Mitsuku has won it 3 times now, and you can ask it pretty much anything, and it will respond in a reasonable manner. So it's one of the smartest bots out there, okay? But you can still fool it quite quickly. Other bots that are amazing, some are not necessarily clever, but just really efficient and more personal. And when you're dealing with insurance, you want a more personal type of scenario. And millennials now way prefer chatting, messaging, emailing than phoning. So using a chatbot interface really goes into those sorts of demographics. Cool. Robot psychology, I think this comes out of MIT or Stanford. And so you can have a chatbot now on Facebook Messenger. If you're feeling depressed, it will help. And it's already shown increases in the students that have been using it through a study. Some other good examples. Knorr Auntie, has anyone heard of this? No, you give it ingredients you have in your fridge, and it tells you what you can make out of it. Okay. Funny enough, though, really good chatbots that have come out 3 years later don't exist anymore. So it's often it's a marketing stunt, and then it's done. So if you really want to make one that's impactful, don't do it because it's a cool stunt. Do it because it has an impact. And then I mentioned Mitsuki before. Cool. Others are not so great. Okay. This is Microsoft Tay. Does anyone remember Microsoft Tay? Yeah? Okay. That was in 2016 June, I think. They did another one in 2017 June. So Tay is they had a Microsoft sent a bot onto the Twitterverse, and it could learn from people's interactions with it. If it retweeted or if it quoted it directly, then it could learn from that. And within 24 hours, it became racist, homophobic, sexist, all of that. And so they learned in 2016, and in 2017, they made sure it couldn't learn from anything political or religious. And it didn't take 24 hours, it took like a week. And it still became racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, everything. Cool. Other not great examples of AI, of intelligent bots, is Siri. They've just hired a good Google AI person to head their AI team because they know it's not great. And they openly admit that it's not a great AI system. I've seen some chatbots that say, built with AI, and it's literally just form filling in a chat interface, and that's not AI. Cool. Other ones, InspiroBot. It's a random generator of words, inspirational quotes with a random background image, and this one happened to come out quite well, I think. Explainable conversation comes unexplainable doubt. Yeah, it makes sense. So the capabilities of chatbots, as they currently stand, what are they really good at? Well, they're really good at providing a voice user interface where sometimes it's dangerous to use an app or inconvenienced. I know of one CEO who has decided to do almost all of his work purely via voice to text or voice notes or things like that. And he says the amount of productivity he's saved after a little while is incredible. Of course, you have to get used to talking to a bot in a crowd. But aside from that, you have this really powerful interface that's different to just using an app and clicking buttons. So it's a different UX experience along there. It also can provide a good conversational context. Obviously, there are some that are good and some that are bad, but you do have more than just what they've entered in the app, and you can understand how a person's saying something rather than just what they said. Okay. Then you can personalize things a lot more, especially if you have a more intimate relationship, which people tend to do in a chatbot interface versus an app. You can have richer data formats. Now, you can do this in apps as well. People are used to sending messages in terms of images, voice notes, videos through a conversational system. These messaging platforms have them built in. You don't have to build it from scratch. And you can augment with the human agent. And I'll bring this up again, but you can augment with the human agent. So they found, so the AI who beat Kasparov in chess, right? And what they then did is okay, let's do another competition where we have a whole bunch of AIs and we have a whole bunch of humans, and they can form teams however they want. And there are two of them. So they can be two AI, two humans, or they can be AI and a human. And the team that won was an AI and a human. Okay? And that'd be the team of two AIs, for example. So there's clearly power in having this augmentation of artificial and natural intelligence. Finally, I mean, you're using computational systems instead of a person. So a lot of the time, the information processing that can go on is really fast. Cool. However, with these capabilities come a lot of weaknesses. That is, the languages available for voice user interface, speech to text, and text to speech is actually quite limited at the moment. Memory is limited in order to actually sufficiently have good context, and it's a cutting-edge field of research, but that makes it a problem for applied systems if it's cutting-edge research. Right? Other aspects is understanding a person is hard. Okay, we know that from our interactions. Now imagine doing it from a computational system that way. So you can personalize something, but it's generally just like, hey, person's name. And, but you can go way more in depth with that, and there's potential to do so, and I think we should. And people are more willing to give these sorts of personal information out, actually, over this type of channel. Obviously, you have to deal with privacy issues and all that, but just so it's there. Okay, processing richer data, even though you have it, is tougher, and people love saying how much data they have, and how much usable data they have is often a fraction, like 100th, of what the data they actually have. It's like, we have all this data, cool. Is it labeled? No? Okay. Not going to use that. Or you just use mechanical Turk. Okay. When you augment with a human agent, it's a very important part of these chatbot artificial systems, right? And a lot of frustration comes in when these systems can't adequately deal with a person's query. So at that point, it normally just says, I don't know. But what it should be doing is passing on to a human to say, this person has said these things. And now there are a few who do hand off, but what they do is just like, yeah, this person's having trouble, fix it, and then they start again. And they've already submitted documents, they've already given their name, ID number, and everything. You're going to start again. So handing off of a system, a lot of this is UX, but it comes to a technological understanding of how you make these systems from the start. If you consider this as a high level, these problems can be broken down a lot to a smaller degree, and can be solved a lot further or closer to the initial pipeline of your design system. And finally, if it's fast, it also fails fast. Very quickly tells you it doesn't understand the question. And within a few seconds. You also have the fortunate ability of chatbots. You're used to people taking a while to reply to messages. So now if it takes a few seconds, it's still okay. Whereas if it's apps taking a while, you generally want to like smash a phone. So it's still a benefit that it doesn't have to be super fast. Some people I know actually bake in like thread dot sleeps in order to make it more realistic. And so it seems more chat-like, more person-like. Okay, in the future, you're going to get a whole bunch of awesome use cases that are really going to test what is capable and what we can do with automated systems. Right? Here are a whole bunch. You can read more at the link there. But I'll just go through the high-level things. Financial services, medicine, healthcare. You've already seen healthcare systems being used with dynamic memory networks. I think it's called Deep Care. It's really awesome. Education, that's going to change the face. Call centers is an obvious one, and I think almost every bank I chat to, they ask about, like, we engage with, like, how much of our people in our call centers can be replaced. And it's like, whoa. Maybe let's, like, help them out with their jobs rather than just, like, shoving them aside, first of all. But a lot of questions that go through a call center, 98% of them are the same. So you can't automate a whole bunch, and now the questions the call center agents need to address are the ones that actually require personal touches or exceptions. Okay, so it becomes a lot more enriching for them as well. Okay, and then a whole bunch of other ones. Again, you can go visit the link, check them all out. More examples there. Another example of future systems. Well, this is actually a current system, but you can see it going a lot further. Multimodal assistance. And this is, have you guys read this? Cool. They want you to order a pizza. They're like, nope, can't understand. Please. And then it's actually a person on the side. So I say multimodal flippantly in this case, and this is not really human augmentation. Maybe you should cross out the chatbot. It's actually just a human. But this is actually how quite a few chatbots start, is you want to test if this is a viable product. So you just have mechanical Turk people in the background just answering it. See if people want it, and then build the AI. Anyway, what this is a system that we've developed, which is not human, but computer vision and some like normal ML. And this is a person will send a picture of what they're eating. We will analyze what's in it. They will obviously confirm. And then what we also do is we say, we know this person is diabetic. So we have some context about who they are. And then we say, well, if you change it from white rice to brown rice, you're going to decrease your risk. And so you have this chatbot interface that people are sending images to, which they normally do to their friends anyway. Of course, you get some weird images. But aside from that, cool. Design principles. So this is a real building I saw recently. Incredible is all I can say. Department of Computer Science at MIT. And so I'm going to talk about design principles of technology and psychology. And these are going to be interrelated themes. But the essence, this is quite important slide, I think. So you want to build a chatbot, and there are three very, very important considerations you should make right at the start. And that is, how much thinking is going to be required from your user? If you're going to be asking, what's your first name? Chris. Thank you. What's your last name? Currin. Thank you. You should have a form instead of a chatbot instead. And I see a lot of these chatbots that are just ill-suited to the interface. And that form of understanding, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. It's that example there. But if you need like these longer conversations, or they really need to think about their answer, or you want to ask how they're feeling, it makes a lot more sense for a person to enter how they're feeling in a conversational context than in an app context. It just makes them more comfortable from our research. Okay. Again, context. So that's going to be like, is there a shared context between people, like their demographic? Is there specific context to that person? And is there context to that conversation as well? So there's a whole bunch of context that how much is going to be relevant for what your chatbot needs to do, your system needs to do. Finally, how much knowledge is acquired? Does it need to do one thing well? Does it need to do a lot of things? Yeah, okay. Doesn't need to do a lot of things really well, in which case, just don't do it. Okay. The technology stack I'll chat about a little bit. Now, we've had a really good talk this morning about speech-to-text by Herman. Where is he? Anyway. So I'm not going to talk anything about that. I'm not actually going to talk anything about text-to-speech either. Both very interesting topics, and both hour-long talks on themselves. I'm going to chat a little bit about these. But this is generally like a design principle behind the chatbot. If you want to get like a high-level overview of what to do and how your process should go, this is kind of what it looks like. Okay, so you get some form of text, okay, and then you analyze the text. Now, natural language processing is its own box, basically, that can go much deeper, okay? And within that, you can also have response generation. I've separated now just for clarity, but you generate a response, and you need to have a knowledge base. So this forms that context of that person. And so it's often the complex context that needs to be formed as well. And that will interact. And then you will have dialogue management, so how they're behaving in this context, how they're behaving in another context. Should I hand them off to another person? What should I ask? I know in like a lot of these dashboard type chatbot systems, you can have a variable number of responses, and often it just chooses a random one. But often you don't want to choose a random one, because how you phrase things is important. There's framing, there's a whole bunch of techniques you can do in order to get people to answer in certain ways based on how you ask in turn. And that is often not considered. And that's often why linguistics and linguists are important in designing these systems, which are often not considered from a computer science background when we just want to like build stuff, break things. It's really fun. Okay, and then speech to text. But of course, this isn't a linear relationship, right? Sometimes you need to go back and forth a few times, it's added in 2 extra lines. But there's a whole bunch involved there, and it's not a single stream system. Okay. To delve a little bit into natural language processing, very high level. Just for anyone who hasn't built a chatbot before, if you go on Dialogflow or Luri, like LUIS, or you go on Amazon Alexa, you're probably going to encounter these terms if you don't know what they mean. Does anyone not know what these mean? Okay, cool. Then I can skip this, saving time. Cool. Response generation. Retrieval-based versus generative models. Sure you understand the difference of this as well. It's the love throwing this image up of this sequence-to-sequence model, and of course you're going to get reinforcement as well. And you can put on sequence-to-sequence models. You can have computer vision in there. You can have computer vision in there. You can also have the CNN as well. Enrich it a bit more. We've had these talks throughout the day. If you weren't here, they will be online. But essentially, response generation generally involves these sorts of devices. To complicate things a little bit more, you can add in memory. But this is what LSTM looks like. From a neuroscience background as well, when someone's like long short-term memory, I'm like, which one is it? Right? So it's medium-term memory, it's what you're saying. It's long and short-term memory, and then they just took out the and because it was a stop word. So this is the general picture of what it looks like. You get forget gate, remember gate, learn gate, use gate. And underlying all of this is some math. Okay, and does anyone know why we use sigmoids in some and tan H's in others? Because it works well. that's the reason why. Okay, state of the art, memory networks coming into play quite a bit. Really, really awesome stuff. This is often memory within a single conversation or single paragraph or a single document that's going on. It's a lot harder to formulate this and scale if it's separate conversations. So everyone heard of a gated recurrent unit? Everyone has? No, okay. But I won't go in depth in it. The point is you read a sentence, and what happens here is this fusion layer can actually go, it's an attentional network as well. So you actually look back into the other ones, and it knows which sentence to reference back as well. So it becomes quite powerful and this is a text representation, and you'll get some facts as the output. Very similar with the image. The point is these networks are dynamic to work with most types of input. You get many types of memory networks, and they're iterating all the time. The one that I really like, it's not explicitly a memory network, but it performs state-of-the-art, is a relational network. This paper of Santora, a good friend of mine was one of the co-authors on it, and this is a convolutional neural network, and then this is basically grooves with the multi-layer perceptrons, and what it's really good at doing is relational reasoning. So it performs better than human on a clever task. So a clever task is you have this image, and it asks what size is the cylinder that's left of the brown metal thing that is left of the big sphere. And humans perform, I think, about 92%. They get 92% right, I think it is. And this gets like 98%. Okay. Similarly, in Babby tasks, it also performs state-of-the-art. But weirdly enough, some Babby tasks, everyone knows what Babby is as well here. Okay, Babby is like a Facebook evaluation metric for how well your natural language processing is doing. How well is this question answering going on? Does it understand, given a certain question and a certain document of conversation, can it answer different questions about that document? Okay, and weirdly enough, chatbots and humans aren't that good at induction. But this actually turns out to be way better than humans, and well, relatively way better than humans. So really, really awesome stuff coming out of relational networks. So I would investigate it if you can. Unfortunately, the paper is relatively short and don't provide a lot of details. But as it becomes more common, you'll hopefully be able to implement it much easier without needing to ask the author. Okay, this is a gated recurrent unit. For those who didn't know, it's basically an LSTM with some stuff taken away. It's less complicated. It seems to work empirically as well as an LSTM, but it's more efficient, so you can throw more at it, or you can run it for shorter. And it seems to work as a similar type of performance. Again, I ignored the math, but there's math in there as well. Okay, other important aspects for how you design a assistant system or chatbot system is dialogue management. So what communication strategies are you going to use? Language tricks, dialogue design, human imitation, and personality development. Now, all of these come through from psychology background. I'm not the one who came up with these awesome things, but these will definitely have an effect of how people respond. So communication strategy, you're not going to talk the same way to the queen as you are to a drunkard at a bar, right? So if you have a person who's trained to you, okay, let me give you an example of call center agents. They have a script, and they will stick to that script regardless of who they're talking to. There's a proposal, and that goes pretty much, let's change which script we're going to use based on the person. But what chatbots are capable of doing are doing real-time changing based on what the person says and how they say it. If they seem frustrated, you know you need to pick up the pace and get to the point quicker. And you can do that with this online learning, and then online processing and response with chatbots. So they provide this type of capability. Similarly, language tricks, how you word things, how you ask things, when you say things. Okay, a whole bunch of stuff there. I'm sure this is not interesting to a whole bunch of technical people. So if you want to know more about this, just chat to me afterwards. Finally, what's really, I think, quite profound actually is, so chatbots often have human likeness. As I said, we're used to talking with our friends via messaging platforms. So now if we change to a system, we also have this association and treat it a lot more human-like, but also have false expectations. But the benefit is we can remove a lot of embarrassment. So what a hotel did is they had a basic concierge that they replaced with a chatbot. And what they found is that people kept asking what the checkout time was, okay, for the chatbot. But they'd only ever asked the reception desk once, maybe twice, because they're actually embarrassed. By the third time, if you're dealing with a person, you've asked them twice what the checkout time is. You're embarrassed to do it the third time, but you're not embarrassed to do it for a chatbot. So there are certain scenarios where this is incredibly useful to have that type of barrier where it's both human, but also you know it's a system and doesn't care if you embarrass yourself, basically. It's not going to judge you, unless there's actually a human on the back. But let's hope that doesn't happen. Cool. And ultimately what this leads to is that like an emergent property, essentially. And that is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Putting all these technologies together to form an interface that people engage with is actually more than just any other computer system that they engage with, just because of the medium they do it and what they associate that with. Okay, so it's more than just another interface, and it's more than just another channel. And a lot of chatbots come out of marketing and turn out terribly. But if you want to have an impact, you really need to understand what people are doing, and often the developer who has to implement this isn't given a proper brief, just throws it together with an automated system, and doesn't really solve the problem they were looking to do, and ends up with more frustrations than solutions. And that's why I say chatbot development is too important to be left to developers, because it involves a longer process than just engineering, for example. So user journey and research is incredibly important to understand what's required of your chatbot, what capabilities does it require. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know how to investigate specific technologies that you're interested in a lot more than I do. And often what you need to decide is, where's the important part of that process that I want you to focus on, because you probably can't focus on all of it. You can't be state on the art of both speech to text and like dialogue management, for example. Or it's incredibly tough to do so. So choose where you want to focus on, and don't try to do everything the best. Okay, let's go through some resources very quickly. So you can build happy stuff or less happy stuff. Career, killer robots, it's totally going to happen. Degree of complexity, and then there's like off the shelf, if it's just an API you call, custom, or you have to build from scratch. And if there's just like dashboard configuration, or if there's programming. And there's a whole bunch out there you can do, and I'm sure I've left a whole bunch off. I know I've left a whole bunch off. Not enough space. But the point is, if you're not sure how to build it, you can kind of choose where you want to go based on how much effort you want and how much like control you want over it. So for example, Dialogflow, you can do everything programmatically, but you can't like choose which network you want it to use, right? You just give it a whole bunch of training examples, and it trains on that. But you can't tell it to use in like a 100-layer LSTM network. It just does what it has in the background. Whereas other ones you can. A really good one is Mycroft.ai. It's open source. I think it's on a whole bunch of Linux platforms as well. And you can pretty much customize as many things as you want, and it's a lot of plug and play as well. So you can take a module out and put another one in and see how well it works. So Minecraft is really good. We also have tried to use before. Document's not great, but it's really robust, and you can choose one if you want. You can give it a whole bunch of training examples, and it learns from relatively few. So that's really awesome. Emotional.ai got bought, so that's gone. Watson Virtual Agent. If you don't want to do anything and want to pay a lot of money, just use Watson Virtual Agent. It comes pre-trained. But, I mean, we're all in here because we love programming, so you're probably going to want to avoid that. You're going to get frustrated with Watson. Okay, some notebooks. These are the links I'm going to skip over very quickly. There's a whole bunch from Udacity. So I mentioned I did work with Udacity. And so if you do any of these as part of a course, I'll probably be marking that. But yeah, so if you want to implement sequence-to-sequence yourself, just go to that notebook, and it actually has a very nice step-by-step guide how to do it. You get a lot of understanding of the intuition behind it. Because you could probably have like a 30-minute, 40-minute chat about sequence-to-sequence models just by itself. And I'm not going to be adequately equipped to give that 30, 40-minute talk, but I can give you a link. Sentiment analysis, language translation, and word-to-vec implementations are all there. You can do it. Yeah, it's all on those notebooks. Follows really well. Similarly, there's a very good texts that are available. The first one I highly recommend: Deep Learning for NLP Best Practices. Some simple stuff, some complicated stuff. Overall, it's quite easy to read. The guy's doing a dissertation in NLP, so it's really quite cogent with how he explains things. The course this is pretty good. I would recommend it. And finally, I would love to read a textbook when I finish the other 10 that I have that I need to do first. But it was recommended to me, and I trust that person, so have a look if you feel so inclined. Intelligent platform stack is probably not that interesting, but this is if you want to have the understanding of how to build it from a scalable perspective, and instead of just the software, there's a whole bunch of hardware required as well, and which ones are required, and what language you're going to use, and what libraries you're going to use, and what architecture you're going to use, and what you're going to put in the pipeline. Okay, a whole bunch of stuff that's probably not important right now, but it's useful to think about as you're building these systems. And actually, I'm going to skip this and come back to it because I love this. I love XKCD, and then we'll have all the time for questions. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the talk. Ask away. I'll also be available during the break and at the after party. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. We've got 7 minutes for questions.
Cool. Yeah.
Have you worked with any companies that have tried to make a more personal chatbot?
Relatively more personal. We've tried to do one. So the one with the computer vision, they sent a picture of the food. That's Number Beast, the company I work with. Another one we try to do is for disease management, but these aren't actually that personal. You understand the context, and you just know basically their past history of this was their blood sugar level, and this is now their blood sugar level, and it's not like that intimate, as it were. Okay, let me just go back. Yeah. Whoop. There we go. This is just a summary of the talk. Sweet.
Right. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys.